Hey everybody, here's our next installment. Take a look at what's going on during the 1930s and with FDR and the New Deal. One of the first topics we'll talk about later on this week is going to be about something called the Dust Bowl. Now, understand the 30s there was a big drought in the Midwest. By Midwest, I'm talking going from the Panhandle of Texas down here through the Oklahoma Panhandle, parts of Kansas and Nebraska, Denver, and honestly, even bring this all the way up here into Minnesota, Iowa, up into the areas of Wisconsin. Now, here's the problem: the drought is the non-man-made portion of this. There's just no rain early part of the 30s. The other problem was over farming. Now, understand this land that was on the Great Plains. Originally, it was really really thick, had this really tall grass in it, very very thick sod, and when the wind blew across, nothing moved. Well, due to over farming, because we got all that big demand for grain back during World War One and the early 20s. Farmers bought up all this land, they plowed it all up, and now that really thick, heavy sod wasn't there anymore. Now, all of a sudden, now with no more rain, okay, no more rains there now, that dirt dries out, and all of a sudden these windstorms come across. Wind picked up this little fine dust, and you see pictures here. It creates these big, huge dust storms that are they literally called them black blizzards because it was literally just a wall of dust you could not see through. It would be like the worst whiteout blizzard ever, but dust instead. Now, besides this, in the 30s, the Midwest also saw crazy infestation. They saw infestation of grasshoppers. We're talking millions of grasshoppers that infest this area, ate up everything, lost entire fields. They had an infestation of jackrabbits. We're talking hundreds of thousands of jackrabbits that came in and infested the area, ate up tons of fields. So literally, farmers were losing all their stuff over the mid 20s, not mid 30s, excuse me. Now, as part of this, we also see a lot of health problems as part of this too. People died because they're inhaling all this dust, creating pneumonia, creating breathing problems, all that kind of thing. Some people packed up and left, but most people just kept farming. The whole idea was if you plow the field, the rain's going to come after that. And so people just kept farming and kept farming and kept farming and didn't really create ways to stop erosion, all this kind of things from happening. There's another picture here now. Because of the impact of the Dust Bowl here, a lot of banks foreclosed on the farms. They couldn't make payments. Migration-wise, a lot of people have, farmers picked up, left Oklahoma for California. Make a guy called Okies. In fact, it was a great book written by F. Scott Fitzgerald about this. It was kind of the idea of farmers that picked up called the Grapes of Wrath. Farmers that had pick up everything, move out west. You kind of get the idea of this from a very famous picture called Migrant Mother, a woman who, with her two kids left. The picture was posed, written by taken by a woman named Dorothea Lange, who took pictures of different stuff during the age of the Depression. But yeah, a lot of people had to pick up and move and go somewhere else until they figure out how to fix the Dust Bowl. We'll talk about this more in class. Now, other FDR related and New Deal issues that are happening this time. There's almost kind of a second New Deal that takes place in the latter half of the 30s. Now, there were some New Deal critics. Not everybody thought the New Deal was the greatest thing in the world. There were some certain programs were declared unconstitutional. The Supreme Court actually said that in some cases, FDR had gone outside of his role as president in making these new laws and stuff, or helping push these new laws through, and that he actually, laws were being made about things that couldn't be made, laws be made about. A lot of criticism from both the right and the left, both the more conservative Republicans and the more liberal Democrats. I mean, there are people in FDR's own party, the Democrats, that didn't like it, and they thought that maybe it didn't do enough or did too much, or it was back and forth. One example of criticism was a guy named Charles Coughlin. He was a Catholic priest on the radio show, so he used the radio to kind of get his message out there. And he basically said, yeah, the New Deal is fine, whatever, but it's not doing enough. And basically that we need to create more cash and make sure more people get that money. So not just create jobs, but create money and try to either print more money or produce more money or put more money into the economy to make sure that people get the money that they need. Anyway, he was very vocal using radio, just as FDR was using radio to teach about what he was doing. Same thing, he used that radio to pitch out the ideas of what he wanted, what he thought that FDR should be doing. I know a guy from Louisiana governor named Huey the Kingfish Long. Great nickname, isn't it? Okay. But he thought more could be done for the relief part of it. He thought maybe, yeah, great, you're trying to do the recovery stuff, the reform parts of the New Deal, but more should be help for the people. He said that he wanted people to be comfortable and should share the wealth. So he said that basically all the rich people should be put money into a program and have that money then distributed down to the less fortunate. So if you're doing well, if you're one of the rich people at this time, they take some of your money away and that trickle that stuff down to the poor. People thought his ideas were really, really close to socialism. They thought his ideas were almost communism in nature, and they still had very, very vocal arguments about this. And he was planning on challenging FDR to run for president until he was assassinated down in Louisiana over a job that somebody claimed that Huey Long had promised them and never given them in the Louisiana state government. The idea of socialism came up. I mean, the idea, a lot of Republicans, more conservative, didn't like the New Deal. They thought it'd give the government a lot more power, kind of so that, the government is now controlling a lot more. This is a lot different than the laissez-faire policies of the 1920s, because, the government now has control over stuff. They control over building, in terms of the PWA, WPA, CWA, all kinds of stuff, these public works areas, building stuff. They control over jobs, in terms of who's getting jobs when. The NRA, in terms of funding businesses, putting businesses up and down. They fund the banks and stocks, in terms of controlling the FDIC and SEC. And they kind of claim that, hey, it's like the Soviet Union right now, and that we're only going to get worse. And all of a sudden, governments are going to control everything, and people have no say, and all those kind of things are going on. And so FDR had all this criticism about his programs. And then came up the legal question. Was the New Deal actually legal? Because all these different organizations that are made, all these different programs and groups and little, alphabet soup things that were created were all part of the executive branch. The executive branch, the branch the president runs, had gone from being the president and his advisors now to being all these different new programs. You know what I mean? And new programs started making all of their rules and their own regulations, especially over banks and over stock trade, all that kind of stuff. And so the question was, well, are they going above their power in where they're set? Because really only Congress can make laws, only Congress can regulate trade in terms of the Constitution. And so the question was, is the president and these programs, are they overstepping their bounds? Are they overstepping their responsibilities of what's written in the Constitution? And the Supreme Court, which was mostly people who had been appointed in the 1920s by guys like Harding and Coolidge, said, yeah, it's unconstitutional, and some of the programs were wiped out. So FDR gets an idea. Let's expand the Supreme Court. He wanted to appoint one more justice for every justice over the age of 7. Remember, in the Supreme Court, you can be on the court for life. Okay? And so it would bring the justice up to be now 9, even possibly as many as 15 Supreme Court justices. Could be added to the Supreme Court. Sorry guys, yawn. It's been a long day. And so a lot of questions are made of, well, they call it the court packing plan, because in a way, FDR is almost trying to rig the Supreme Court so that whatever he proposes, wherever he says, whatever he tries to make happen, is going to happen. Almost kind of a little cartoon on here that says, here's FDR saying, please give me some more, like an Oliver Twist and that kind of stuff. Well, there were some reactions to this whole deal here, FDR is packing the court. Maybe people thought it was not necessary. Heck, some people said FDR was acting like a dictator, compared him to Hitler. It was sent back once to the Senate. FDR got to revise the bill a little bit and sign a revised bill. So we kind of see, something's changed in the court. As FDR could add more members to the court now, it changed from being conservative to being liberal. And in fact, one of the early very conservative judges, who wanted things to stay the same, Justice Owen Roberts, turned liberal, meaning he wanted to make more changes. So in the end now, there were 5 liberal justices wanting change, 4 conservative justices not wanting change. And so when things like FDR's programs came up for review, Supreme Court, when somebody challenged it, usually they passed 5-4 because Roosevelt got to put his guys, they got to put his guys on the court, and that helped him out a lot. So with the new popularity in 1936, FDR is reelected. Once again, he's elected in 1940 due to his popularity. I'm saying this, guys, he's the first ever president to serve more than 2 terms. It's only after he's reelected a 4th time that the Constitution has changed to say that a president can only serve 2 terms. Now, what he does plan to do right after his reelection in 1936 is to meet all that criticism he got from people about the New Deal. So he tries to fix, tries to finish previous programs that were deemed unconstitutional, tries to get them back in, and tries to fix the problems in the other programs. Now, one of the worries was all the deficit spending, all the spending he was doing from debt. going to country and farther from the debt. So one of the things he did do was raise taxes on certain groups, especially the rich, help pay for the programs. The rich were not fans of this, but the poor thought it was a great thing. One thing he made which was very, very important yet today is called the Social Security Administration. One of the questions was, how do you help the elderly, disabled, widows and survivors of war, those kind of things. And so the Social Security program was made. The idea was that every single person puts money into a public fund as part of taxes, and then at one point and later on, that big public fund is going to be used to help people in their retirement, give them a monthly payment after a certain age. I pay this. If you ever look on a paycheck, you see where it says FICA, F-I-C-A. FICA is Social Security. So every single paycheck I get, part of my paycheck goes in the big Social Security slush fund, and then that gets paid out to people. I always joke with my grandmother, and she, talked about how I work too hard. I'm like, well, Grandma, I'm paying Social Security, so deal with it. I love my grandma; she's cool. But that's kind of part of it. You know what I mean? This program is still around today. It might not be around in the future for all we know, but it's one of the most important parts of the New Deal, helping people who, when they're done working, can get a little help from the government to keep going, live a healthy life yet. The Wagner Act talked about National Labor Relations Board to kind of help strikes. What basically the Wagner Act did was it allowed private labor unions to organize. That means labor unions and companies could now organize legally, and they could use collective bargaining. Basically, they could meet with the management and make a deal for all members of the union to end strikes. And that companies could not fire striking workers, couldn't hire scab workers, those kind of things. Basically allowed for a new period of organizing strikes and trying to fix labor problems that were happening. There was a National Labor Relations Board, which was going to help enforce the laws, make sure all practices were right, make sure that employees are being treated fairly, and that companies were obeying all the rules. Last little part is called the WPA Works Progress Administration. The previous groups, CWA, the PWA, some of them have been declared unconstitutional or they kind of ran out of funding. Once again, WPA comes out to provide public work programs to help employ Americans, whether it be through painting murals or building dams or all that kind of stuff, either through federal money or federal money provided to the states, and the states paid people. They're going to help people get them state jobs and help them have a job to get through depression. So that's kind of the second half of the New Deal, guys. Make sure you go through this. We'll talk about this more in class, especially talk about Social Security and debate that, and we'll also be debating the whole idea of the New Deal and if it's truly an effective program or not. Thanks a lot, guys. We do on Wednesday. We will see you then.